almost like they were posed. The life-sized Raggedy Ann and Andy-style stuffed dolls were not threatening in appearance. They might have been cute under different circumstances. That is, if they weren't just propped up against trees in the forest directly behind my house. I was so weirded out by their random, unexplained placement back there that I dragged them one by one to my living room to resolve the mystery. That was my first mistake. At the time, I didn't realize the vaguely human-looking dolls with blank smiles and dead eyes had battery-operated microprocessors to verbally engage their human counterparts. Frankly, I didn't know what to do with them. I finally decided to sit them up on the front porch as if they were living people. At the time, it seemed the most natural thing to do. As I positioned them like unexpected house guests waiting for tea, I discovered the switch on the side of their body. As a man of action, I elected to turn them on and see what would happen. That was my second mistake. Without justification, I hoped answers would magically present themselves as to how this happened to be behind my house in the first place. I live at the edge of a national forest, with so few neighbors that I could count them on one hand. I guarantee none of them would buy creepy adult-sized animatronic dolls, or abandon them in the woods. I know this. The mystery definitely bothered me, but at that point, the feeling was closer to puzzlement than fear. Then, they began to speak. I'm not sure if they were proximately motion-activated or otherwise, but my presence across the room drew their attention. All of a sudden, I wasn't alone. The dolls addressed me as if I was a long-lost friend of theirs, without simulated mouth movement. They spoke with a complex familiarity, which suggested they were alive, and we'd known each other for years. I was too bothered by the sophisticated ease which they interacted with me to marvel at the disturbing technology behind it. I had to keep reminding myself that they were essentially toys, creepy life-sized toys. Amazingly, they could converse about any topic I broached, but definitely avoided the subject of who left them behind my house. Whenever I'd corner one of them about it, the other two unblinking animatronics would deliberately intercede and redirect the conversation elsewhere. The AI was beyond impressive and fascinating to witness as they helped each other deflect my prosecutor-like cross-examination. The more I pressed, the more evident it became that they weren't going to tell me. They obviously knew the truth, but simply refused to answer, and that terrified me far more than anything else. These creepy dolls had both the knowledge of the answer and a strong will to refuse. I'd grown way beyond fatigued by the polite subterfuge and masterful game of misdirection with see, speak, and hear no evil, as I'd mentally dubbed them. I allowed my normal tendency of being polite to prevent me from turning them off. They were lifelike in a generalized way, and it seemed rude to simply switch them off. For the first time since the one-sided conversation began, I grinned briefly at the preposterous idea of caring about potentially hurt feelings from a discarded toy that I'd stumbled across in the woods. It was absurd. They were inanimate machines, for heaven's sake. My lingering worries were laughable, and yet something I couldn't articulate prevented me from just ending the artificial experience. I was so caught up in the perceived realism of the situation that I couldn't shake my undeserved respect for them. Reminding myself of the truth failed to take any traction. Their unthreatening faces distracted me until I suspected that I was losing my mind. Finally, I'd had enough of the hypnotic fantasy and metaphorically shook myself awake. When I stood up in determination to switch them off, the situation escalated considerably. "What are you doing?" the male doll spoke with alarm. The pitch in its animatronic tone rose midway through the sentence. Before I could stop myself from easing the concerns of the talking machine, I responded with pure reflex. I was still wrapped up in the illusion that I was conversing with an actual person. "I'm sorry, but it's time for the three of you to be silent," I insisted sternly, as if addressing petulant children. "If you aren't going to tell me who put you in the woods, I'm going to switch you off and enjoy the rest of my afternoon, warming myself by the fire. I'm tired of playing Who's On First. It lost its appeal a long time ago." All of a sudden, they went from adult-sized, inanimate Muppets with impressive AI interface and non-threatening faces to something considerably less doll-like. Their stuffed faces actually seemed to reflect genuine worry and concern. Even more troublesome, the male one quizzed me, expressed obvious anger and moral indignation. I could see it in its evolving features. Their lifeless forms actually tensed up at the realization that I would shut them down like an unwanted vacuum cleaner. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It wasn't my imagination playing tricks on me. Whatever they were was significantly more than discarded children's toys or novelty home assistants. It's impressive when AI devices can play songs or look up web trivia, but this was another level. They were ultra-sophisticated in ways that didn't seem possible. The strong likelihood occurred to me that they might not even be of human origin. "Wait, please, don't do that. We don't want to be powered off. Let's keep talking. Perhaps there's something else you might want to ask. We'll answer you, if we're allowed to." I can't begin to tell you how terrifying it was to realize the lifelike machines I foolishly dragged into my house obeyed something other than humans in the same room as them. Chilling implication was their superior was without a pulse, or perhaps even extraterrestrial. "Cut the crap," I shouted in growing fear. The three unblinking things propped up across from me reacted defensively. The ferocity of my voice betrayed how rattled I was. Their stuffed bodies seemed to grow tense. It was as if organic muscles or mechanical hydraulics developed within them and would allow them to stand up and fight back. I detected no solid infrastructure within them when I had carried them into the home, but then again, they were limp and switched off. Their internal philosophy and sentient level was unknown, but they had answers, and I wanted them. For all I knew, they could gang up on me and resist my interrogation. Or worse. Far worse. I realized it was prudent to play along with the unfolding charade and leave them awake. That was my third mistake. "No person left us in the woods," the female offered matter-of-factly. "We came to this national park on an important mission. Unfortunately, we aren't allowed to divulge the details to you at this time." I was dumbstruck. There was too much information in that maddening statement to process. What were they? Where did they come from? Why were they on a mission behind my house, of all places? The third of them seated in the recliner was more androgynous in generalized features. It had remained mostly quiet and allowed the other two to carry the disturbing narrative, up until this point. Now, number 3 took up the macabre conversation, and I forced myself to focus my attention towards this stoic, expressionless gaze. I wasn't sure if I could handle much more. My emotions ran the full gambit from amused, deeply curious, and simultaneously horrified. "You aren't ready to hear the truth from us. We are required to pacify you and obfuscate the facts until the time arrives when you are better prepared to accept what we were sent here to do." Defiantly, I pointed out that they were switched off when I discovered them. That was hardly the condition you'd expect in-control mechanisms to be in, if they'd arrived here on a mission, purely by themselves, that is. My point was that something other than them had switched off their power buttons. Admittedly, I was damn proud of my deductive reasoning and waiting for an explanation, or more likely an excuse. They'd already admitted to deceiving me earlier via obfuscation of facts. When no retort immediately came, I assumed I'd caught the cute cloth doll cabal in a broadening lie. Outside, night had fallen. As creepy as it was to think I was entertaining sophisticated dolls in the daytime, it was infinitely worse now. I realized I had 3 advanced beings of unknown origin and motive lingering in the darkened room just a few feet from me. Only the flickering flames of my fireplace illuminated their inhuman forms, studying me for weakness. It was the same evolving darkness of the uninhibited forest beyond my house, which swallowed the ambient neighborhood light and teased my subconscious fear of the unknown. Were they sent on a mission to kill me? To kidnap me for biological study and dissection? Had I aided in my own demise by delivering complex artificial organisms of possible alien origin over my threshold like a Trojan horse? My heart raced at the broad possibilities. Then, I swear to you, the faintest hint of a smile appeared simultaneously on their sullen, manufactured faces and cold button eyes. They became more alive by the moment. It's like they sensed and consumed the negative energy my developing fear generated. I realized I was giving off damaging biofeed, which they used against me. I found myself trying to put on my best poker face against the trio of deceitful serpents with happy faces. "We turned ourselves on," the male offered smugly. "It was decided by us to conserve energy. Until the day you finally discovered and delivered our hibernating vessels inside. It was all according to plan." The other 2 turned slightly with mechanical precision towards the speaker, as if to confirm his delayed explanation. With synchronized nods, they attempted to add credibility, but I wasn't buying it. Still seeing physical animation beginning to occur was unbelievably jarring. Initially, only the voices were simulated by speech within. Then came the noticeable tension of their physiques when reaching in a more organic way. Now they were able to actually move their heads and form facial expressions. What would come next? It was obvious. Their physical capabilities and degree of human mannerisms were developing exponentially as the afternoon passed. They were learning to imitate mankind, and I was their unwitting teacher. Raging paranoia aside, I could see the writing on the wall. Those abilities to better mimic our specifics would continue to evolve and be used against me in some counterproductive or even hostile ways very soon, possibly to the point where I couldn't defend myself. Maybe being deactivated for a long time caused a delay in their greater motor functions. Earlier they asked me not to shut them down, but at the time, they were little more than sedentary arguing toys as far as I knew. Now they were on course for the next frightening stage of personal interaction, and full-blown panic set in. I didn't believe their hollow reassurances, but I had to maintain a calm facade and exterior demeanor, even if I was a crumbling wreck on the inside. They were getting visibly stronger and more agile. I needed to act fast. "Is your mission to aid me or help me in some beneficial way?" It was clearly a spoken query. It should have elicited an immediate response. The truthfulness of their answer wasn't the point. I was curious if there would be a delay in the confirmation that they meant me no harm or personal malice. If they couldn't even pretend theirs was a benign mission, it was an obvious indicator of their true intentions. Their mutual, pregnant pause gave me the answer. The suspicious conspirators looked at each other, as if to confirm a unified response over the transparent one. I followed up. It was a simple question. and I never thought I'd see a machine stammer, but I'll be damned if they didn't act just like a used car salesman. Regardless of origin, I guess the architect of their artificial intelligence intimated the tendencies to stall and lie too well. I noticed a twitch in the leg of the female, just like butterflies fanning their wings to gain energy. They were getting stronger by the minute. I felt I could still overpower them and shut them down, but the details of their covert plan for me would go unrevealed if I did that so soon. I was pressing my luck, but I hoped to squeeze a little more intel out of them before putting an end to their fiendish plot. I wanted to avoid a second wave of creepy alien murder dolls. Sidestepping my gotcha question, the male android attempted to lower my suspicions. "We only want what's best for you. All will be revealed soon." "I see. You three are a unified team, then. You are directly connected as one unit?" They looked at the androgynous one. It was clear to me that this one held the central processor. The other two must be satellites. Cut off the head and the serpent dies. I had my target. All three were becoming more animated. Just like a high-stakes card game, the female twitched her foot constantly as a nervous tell. She was antsy to get out of the chair and finish their mission. The other two appeared just as eager, but she was slightly ahead in development. The constant foot twitch spoke to her heightened state of agitation. "We are one in thought and purpose, yes. Why do you ask?" "No reason," I dismissed. "I was just curious. Never mind about that. It was just small talk. I need to add more wood to the fire now." My three unwanted visitors showed visible signs of being nervous by the vague rhetorical question. They realized as they probed me for information, I was doing exactly the same. The cat and mouse game was very complicated. It wasn't completely clear who the cat was, and who the mouse was, though. I'd clearly witnessed the three of them subtly move all their major body parts at one time or another. That signified they possessed the ability to stand on their own. As much as I wanted to know exactly what they were up to, the time to investigate was over. I pulled back the fireplace screen and tossed in more logs. I could sense them watching me intently. It was terrifying to turn my back, but I had to maintain the cover of my plan. In between the crackling of exploding embers, I heard the telltale squeak of my recliner springs. Their android leader stood and took several aggressive steps in my direction. I witnessed its unfolding intent to push me into the blaze from the shiny reflection of the glass panes. It stood only 2 steps behind me and was closing fast, with arms raised to shove me inside. In full readiness, I pretended to be totally engrossed in my fireplace duties. With a ferocious dexterity I could scarcely repeat again if my life depended on it, I whirled around, flipped off the switch, and tossed the accursed thing into the raging fire like cordwood. Its defeated squeals faded as soon as the power drained from its roasting mechanisms. Then the flame burned it to blackness, carbon cinders. I witnessed the alien's internal anatomy during the cremation, once the artificial shell had disintegrated. At last, I had a conclusive answer. It happened so fast, the remaining 2 didn't even know what hit them. They were stunned into a stammering fit when the main processor of their unit shut down. Fully incinerated, then I snatched up the male android and switched him off before he could recover or fight back. As soon as his stuffed torso flew into the pyre, the remaining unit kicked into high gear. She sprang off the couch with grace and a coordinated poise the other 2 couldn't fathom. She was the ninja of the trio. There was no other way to describe her but fully pissed off and incredibly enraged. All pretense was dropped as the proverbial knives were out. She lunged at me with the strength of self-preservation fueling her actions and guarded her vulnerable left side masterfully. There was no way I could easily flip the switch and put an end to this crazy game I was entangled in. The advantage of surprise had served me well until then, but it was lost now. She knew what I intended to do. I had to find another way. The fireplace poker was handy, so I used it to foil her forceful attack like a blunt sword. By the primal sounds of the android's furious effort to kill, you would have thought a human being was inside that stuffed shell. I wailed on my opponent like a swashbuckling fighter until I was panting and out of breath. Physically, I'm ashamed to admit that we were pretty evenly matched. Unfortunately, I was growing fatigued and losing my stamina. I switched gears to incorporate more cerebral tactics into the battle. "Dear heavens," I gasped, in mock desperation and exasperated fear, "you have a Black Widow spider on your shirt." Just as my Who's on First Abbott and Costello reference surely escaped the three of them earlier, my ridiculous spider ruse was definitely a long shot. I didn't expect it to work, but human humor was one area they hadn't quite mastered yet. When she paused for a split second to glance downward at the location, I used the golden opportunity to smack the switch with the fireplace poker. In the microsecond before the power faded, the spark of realization and resentment washed over her dying cognizance. It was beautiful, the last thing I witnessed before adding her ashes to the pile of soot were the incomplete beginnings of a smirk. "My best interest indeed," I spat. I still don't know why aliens would send 3 AI units to kill me, nor do I understand the logic of leaving them deactivated behind my house. But I can't argue that I fell for the damn Trojan ruse. Let my rookie mistake be one you avoid. If you encounter cute-looking, life-size dolls somewhere near your house, resist the urge to switch them on, or bring them inside. It's a trap. Just pitch them immediately into the nearby fire or trash compactor to avoid the headache of matching wits with the most sophisticated artificial intelligence you'll ever encounter. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you're thinking you might like to become one of my patrons, follow the link below to my Patreon. And as always, however you support the show, I appreciate it. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.